It started with a single ring of the phone, piercing the calm twilight at my ranch lake, a pocket of land I thought I owned outright, until I realized I owned so much more than the land. I was already standing on the weathered dock, the late day sky shifting to a deep, pink-hued dusk. My camping gear, just a simple tent, a few supplies, a quiet promise of solitude, was pitched near the water's edge. I was ready for a peaceful night under the stars. Then the phone vibrated again. The number flashed, but I recognized it. It was the president of the Homeowners Association. The voice on the other end was frosty, accusing. "We see someone camping by the lake," she said. "We've called the cops." I felt that sudden chill. A campsite might seem harmless, but in the world of rules, boundaries, and HOA oversight, it apparently looked like an intrusion. I paused, wind rustling the tall grass around the lake's bank, and looked at the tent. "I'm out here by my own damn lake," I muttered. I realized then how absurd the escalation was. A simple camping trip turned into a confrontation with authority. What neither the HOA president nor the patrol knew was that I didn't just own the land, I was the county sheriff. The call ended. Minutes later, headlights broke through the trees. 2 patrol cars rolled slowly past the lodge, their lights off but the silhouettes of officers easy to read, paramilitary gear, flashlights, serious faces. My heart raced, not because I feared them, but because I was about to decide whether to show my hand. I watched them set up across the water's edge, speaking in low tones, scanning the campers, spot with suspicion. I could step forward, badge in hand, ending it all in a curt motion. But I waited. I wanted them to stay, to stumble over the rules they thought applied to me. My mind wandered briefly to the neighbor who'd called them, a prim, perfect woman living in her pristine house overlooking the lake. Always complaining about unsightly tents, unauthorized use, and those people camping without permission. She was the kind who believed the beautiful lawn meant control over who came and who camped, control over how the lake was used. She saw me as a nuisance, though she didn't know how deeply entangled I already was in that land. The officers approached the tent carefully. Their flashlights illuminated the nylon fabric, the beam caught transient shadows inside. They knocked. A heavy-handed voice asked, "You know you can't camp here without HOA approval." I leaned back on the dock, arms folded, silent in the dusk. Inside the tent, my cousin's eyes widened. He nodded toward me. "He's the landowner," he whispered. I nodded back. The officers asked for ID. My cousin pulled out a driver's license, my name. The confusion flickered across their faces. "Sir," one of them began. I stepped into the light. Badge clipped to my belt, and suddenly the dynamic changed. I told them calmly, "I'm the county sheriff. And this is my property." The silence was immediate. The officers shifted, the power dynamic reversed. The HOA president's voice echoed in my mind, "We've called the cops." I sat back and watched as their faces registered it, recognition, surprise, slight embarrassment. They thanked me and slipped away into the night, lights fading, leaving the formal procedures to the quiet of the lake. But I wasn't done. You see, I didn't reduce myself to mere holder of authority. I knew what the HOA had been doing. Creeping rules, hidden fines, harassing campers, manipulating community safety as cover for controlling the lake's use. They banned certain tents, claimed that overnight guests created liability. One resident after another had been asked to leave. I had watched this quietly from the sheriff's seat, gathering information, waiting for the moment to act. And now that moment was here. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. I walked the perimeter of the lake, following the restrictions posted on the association board: no camping without approval, no tents after dusk, guest camping limited to members only. I photographed the signs, noted the inconsistent enforcement, traced the chain of approvals, who signed them, who denied them, and why they targeted a few of the residents especially. I followed the paper trail right to the HOA's leadership committee. I knew that as sheriff I had jurisdiction over the county, but more importantly, I had the moral high ground. Later that week I called a full meeting of the lake community, under the auspices of safety briefing. The HOA president was there, smug as ever, believing she controlled the agenda. I revealed nothing at first. I thanked everyone for showing, and announced we would review the camping policies and lake usage rules in light of emergency management protocols. I asked, who signed the latest rule changes? Who approved the fines? Who knew about the clause granting the HOA power to call authorities without landowner notification? Questions stacked up. The president stammered. The residents shifted uncomfortably. Then I dropped the bomb. I pointed out that the association's rule drafting had been done outside of proper homeowner vote, that the fines were being levied without documented due process, and in some cases campers were being told to leave even though they were owners or invited by owners. In short, the HOA had overstepped its authority. I held up the law, my badge, if you will, and explained that by county statute the landowners retained rights to free use, including temporary camping on their land, and that the HOA could not delegate police-like powers without due process. If they did, the county would step in. Calm, controlled. My tone left no space for smug rebuttal. The president turned pale. She realized her power was slipping. The neighbors, who had silently watched while the HOA squashed freedoms, now raised their voices. A veteran homeowner spoke. I've been told no tent, no overnight guests because of liability. But the lake is ours, the land is ours. Another chimed in about the countless emails, the ticking fines, the creeping feeling of being watched. The room pulsed with quiet anger. I then offered a way out. We would rewrite the camping policy together, remove the onerous requirement for HOA approval for owner camping, restore a permit process only for paid external campers. The homeowners voted overwhelmingly in favor. The president's committee was essentially stripped of the unilateral power to call law enforcement over owner camping. They looked at me like a storm had passed. Back at the lake that evening, I pitched my tent again, this time right beside the shoreline where I'd been told I shouldn't. The water lapped gently, the stars reflected in the still surface, and I sat by the fire, watching the flicker of flame and knowing that the lake belonged to me, and by extension, belonged to all the homeowners who had been bullied. The dinner lights of the houses across the water glowed. I lifted a marshmallow, toasted it. I felt no threat, only the satisfaction of setting the record straight. A week later, I saw the HOA president walking the property line by the woods. Our eyes met. She nodded stiffly, as if acknowledging defeat. I nodded back politely. The lake went quiet. The rules faded. The campers came back. The silence of a normal evening reclaimed that place. But something deeper had shifted. The power had changed hands, and the message was clear: you may try to bend rules, but you cannot bend the law. In the days to come, the mound of paperwork I'd gathered found its way to the county board, reviews, hearings, audits of the HOA's finances and procedures. The president couldn't simply call cops again without consequence. The message settled into the community like a broken-in leather chair, firm, undeniable. I watched from the dock, waves whispering. They had called the cops when I camped at my own ranch lake, and didn't know I'm the county sheriff. And now everyone knew. The night breeze slid across the water. I packed up the tent the next morning, but layered with satisfaction. I left behind the fire stain in the dirt, the small pile of ashes that spoke of one peaceful night. I stepped into my truck, drove away, but I knew the lake would remain open, the land free, the campers welcome. The HOA would have to remember. Sometimes the person they call intruder walks in with the law at his belt, and the rule book in his hand.